Hello and welcome to my third video exploring synthesizing a sound inspired by the human voice. I previously tried this using Pigments and Surge, and spoiler alert, Serum 2 is going to win this. Not that it's a competition, but Serum 2 is going to give me the best result for a couple of reasons. First of all, Serum's biggest strength, of course, is in the building of wavetables, and that's going to let us get exactly the kind of glottal waveform that we need. And the second thing is the Formant filter, which we will talk about very soon. So let's get set up here. My controller today is going to be the Linstrument, and I'm going to be making a MIDI polyphonic expression sound, for the most part minus the polyphonic part. I'm just going to make a very expressive sound. So for the voicing over here, I'm going to switch this to mono and legato. I'm going to turn the Portamento up somewhere around 30 milliseconds. And I've got things to say about the Portamento, but we'll get to that later. Then I'm going to go over to my oscillator 1, turn down its level all the way, and activate my filters. Filter 1 will be a normal 12 decibel low pass filter, and filter 2 will be the miscellaneous Formant III. So I'm going to turn down the resonance on the low pass filter, and I'm going to turn up the cutoff about there. And if I make a sound right now, it's going to be hideous. Actually, there's going to be no sound yet because I haven't set up the pressure to control the level. But while we're on this page, I'm going to go and edit my wavetable. And I'm just going to delete all of these, set my grid to 0, 0, and I'm going to draw a shape. It's going to be something like that. Smooth it out a little bit at the top. Now I've got all kinds of harmonics up here because of the hand-drawn nature of this wave. I'm just going to leave them in for now. If I decide later that I don't like them, I can just do the right-click here and clear the high frequencies. But they're going to have very small amplitudes, and I think that's going to give it a more realistic and ever so slightly brighter sound. And so this is our basic glottal waveform. This is the sound the vocal cords make, unaffected by other resonances in the body like the mouth and the chest and whatnot. And this kind of smooth waveform here is a more relaxed kind of singing. So I'm going to add a second wave, and this one I'm going to turn into something more like a shark fin. The pretty sharp cutoff at this point. And I'm going to morph spectral. And so this is a more strained, stressed sound when you're pushing more energy through the vocal cords. So I'll close that up, make sure my wavetable position is at 0. And I'm going to go set up the mod matrix now. And I'm going to be doing a lot of things with MPE-Z and MPE-Y. And so I'm going to send those to macros so that I don't have to redraw my response curves all the time. So my first destination will be macro 1. And that will be controlled by MPE-Z. And I'm going to double click on this little curve here. Now, if you're new to programming MPE sounds, this next part is very important, and I recommend that you take a lot of time getting it right for your hands. So this is going to be how how the MIDI signal responds to the pressure that you're applying on the Z-axis. And for me, this is usually going to be a shape kind of like this. And what I'm looking for here is when I'm playing with a medium amount of pressure, I want to have a pretty even response across here. And then I will stretch if I want to make it really loud or really soft. I can press extra light or extra hard. But most of the time I want to have a smooth, consistent response. Again, if you're new to this, it's good to take some time playing around and getting this curve to look exactly the way that feels best to your fingers, because that will make it much more fun to play, and in the long term it will avoid stressing your fingers in ways that you don't want. You don't want to have to push too hard. So I'm going to close that up, and now that that's set to macro 1, I'm going to use macro 1 to modulate oscillator A level. And I'm going to edit this curve too, but I'm going to leave it flat. I'm just going to change the rise and the fall. And the rise I'm going to keep pretty low, but the fall I'm going to turn way, way up. And what this does is this is going to slow down the signal change from the pressure. And I'm doing that because I'm doing a mono legato voice. And what happens with MPE when you're playing mono legato is when you play a first note at one pressure and then you press the second note, it will instantly cut off the first note and start the pressure on the second note at 0. And so you get these dips in volume that sound they're really unpleasant to work with. And turning up this fall knob will just smooth out that change. And so at this point I think I should be set up to make a sound that won't be horrible. But I've done something wrong, so I'm not hearing anything. Oh, my Z pressure this amount has to be turned all the way up. Okay, now we should hear something. And there's a little clickiness at the beginning of my note, so I'm going to give myself some attack on this envelope. Something like that. Now while I'm here, I also want macro 1, which again is controlled by the pressure, to modulate my waveform. So it'll be oscillator A, wavetable position. And now when I press harder, we'll get more of the harmonics from that shark fin kind of shape. I'm going to edit this guy one more time. Give myself a little more dynamics. And I think I just want to turn down my main volume a little bit. And we're playing a human voice here, or we will be once we do some more things. And some vibrato really helps out with that. So I'm just playing the vibrato with wiggling my finger on the instrument. If you're not comfortable with that, you could set up an LFO to do that, or if you want to play this on a keyboard. But the vibrato contributes mightily into it being more like a human voice. Now I've got a little like a low frequency clickiness between my notes here, which you might not hear if you're not on headphones, but it's annoying, so I need to fix that. I think that's because this macro here does not have that lag on it, so while we're getting a smooth volume transition, the pressure is also affecting the wavetable position, and that's giving us that little click thing when it suddenly changes. So I'm going to leave these two linked. I'm just going to turn them up about there, and that should make that clickiness go away. Okay, so that's macro 1 set up. Macro 2, while I'm here, will be our Y controller. I'm going to bring that all the way up. Now the curve you use for your timbre is kind of less important than the one you use for the pressure. It's not going to cause you huge problems, and you might want it to be very different depending on what sound you're making. So I'm going to give it just a little rise and fall so that we don't get any clicks from this. And I'll go with this sort of shape right now. And actually, I don't want to do the rise and fall here. I want to do the rise and fall on the curve of the parameter that I'm actually modulating using macro 2. So I'm going to use macro 2 to modulate filter 1 frequency like about that far. And on this, I'm going to set my rise and fall. Now, it's usually not recommended to use the y-axis to control the filter frequency. But I think it's going to be subtle enough here that that will be okay. And also, I do want this frequency parameter to be independent of the things that I'm controlling with macro 1. So we'll do that, and we'll see how it's sounding now. I'm going to throw some reverb on this really quick. Use the convolve and grab the factory long choir hall should be good. Increase the size a bit. Just give us a less dry sound to work with as we do everything else. So back to the oscillator. I want some noise in this sound. I want it to give it a hint of breathiness. And this is another area, I'm not sure why exactly, but this is... Serum sounds much better at doing this than Pigments or Surge did. Not sure what I was doing wrong on those others. Maybe there is a better way to do it, but I'm going to turn on my noise. And I'm going to use H breath, which I think is human breath, under the organics header. I'm going to turn up the pitch a little bit and turn down the level all the way. And I'm going to use that to modulate oscillator A phase distortion from noise. Turn that up about halfway, and then I'm going to go back into my matrix. Macro 1 will turn down that warp effect, because when you're singing loud you should be hearing the breath less, because your singer's going to move away from the microphone. There are different ways you can use the noise and how you want to treat it. There's a lot of leeway there. You also find if you're listening on headphones versus speakers, this effect that you can barely hear on the speakers might be overwhelming and really annoying on the headphones. So how much you want to use this noise effect is going to depend, I think, on what kind of mix you're using the sound in. So just always be ready to turn down that warp knob if the noise is bothering you. Or be ready to turn it up if you can't hear anything. So I'll put that around 55%, 56%. I'm going to turn down my master cutoff on this low pass filter so I can get a softer low end. You might have heard the noise sounding unpleasant in places there. That's okay, that'll get cleaned up a bit when we start using the second filter. So I'm going to go over to the Mix tab and make sure that my filter 1 is going into filter 2, and noise and oscillator A are both going into filter 1. And so now we're going to start hearing the Formant effect. And this is really where the fun begins. I struggled for a while with this Formant filter because I didn't really understand what it's doing. What it's actually doing is exactly what I need it to do, but in a slightly unexpected way, and I didn't expect it to be doing what I needed it to do. But it turns out I think the Serum developers have put a lot of thought into how this particular filter is working. And so it's going to do what we need with minimal crazy things that we need to do. And I really appreciate the thought they put into making this one. So what the Formant filter does is it's modeling the shape of the mouth primarily. And if you shape your mouth in different ways, the brain that hears the sound will interpret it as the different vowels, as the different vowel sounds. A, E, I, O, and U. And this effect is sort of a mostly static filter bank, because you're not going to change the shape of your mouth wildly when you're making each vowel sound. I was confused here because I thought that what the cutoff would do would act as a base frequency, which was going to give you kind of the size of the mouth. And the Formant was going to give you the vowel sound, but it's actually the opposite. So the cutoff is going to give you the different vowel shapes. So you see we have a few peaks here that are, I'll turn up the resonance so we can see better. We have a few peaks that are changing their relationship to each other. And that relationship is what the brain is going to interpret it as a vowel. And somewhere around the middle of this thing, somewhere around 333 hertz. I'm not sure how much I trust that number because of the way this filter is working, which one is the 333 hertz. But somewhere around there is the ah sound that I am looking for. And what the Formant is going to control, the Formant parameter, is just going to drag this whole shape up and down the frequency spectrum. And at lower Formant value, you're going to have a larger body resonating the sound. And as you turn it up, you're going to get a smaller and smaller body. I find that the human range is somewhere between, the most human range is somewhere between 20 and 50% here. So I'm going to set this to 25%, and my cutoff is there. And as we can see from this filter diagram, we are cutting off huge amounts of gain from everywhere that doesn't have a resonant peak, and that's why our sound is suddenly a lot quieter. So I'm going to turn the main volume up. And you might notice some of these notes are louder than others, and some of these notes sound more like the ah sound than others. So my E and my F here their fundamental and harmonic frequencies, I think, are falling in the gaps between the resonant peaks. And that's why they're not really, the peaks aren't really catching them to make them sound quite like the ah, and they're also a lot quieter. Whereas the A is pretty strong. Now on the other synths I've tried to do this on, I did not really have a good solution for this problem. Basically what I would do is I would stick a compressor on in the effects chain and clamp down, well, just clamp down at a certain threshold, and then the louder notes would just be squashed to get a more even sound. But it did not fix the vowel problem because those notes were still not sounding like the ah. And that is the really nice thing that Serum is going to do for us. So I'm going to turn on the key tracking for this filter. Now what key tracking ordinarily does is it will just linearly map your pitch across your keyboard to the cutoff. That's not what this is going to do here. What it's going to do is it's going to bounce the cutoff back and forth. So it's going to stay in about the same range, but it's just going to slightly tune. And as it slightly tunes, these peaks will move just a little bit, and they'll catch those missing notes, like the E and the F. Now the Formant filter is still not a perfect emulation of the human mouth, but this is a lot better now, and it means I don't have to draw some crazy curve to map my key tracking onto the notes. I actually tried to do that. It was a total pain and also didn't work. They're doing that for us with this key tracking here, and that's pretty brilliant, and I do love it and appreciate it. So what if we want different vowel sounds? Me personally, I don't think it sounds very good to morph them. and I would like a better interface for doing so. So I think I want like a quantized selector for what vowel shape rather than a modulation that's going to interpolate between them. But what we can do, just for the moment to hear it, I'm going to set the modulation wheel to modulate the cutoff. And then we should be able to morph between different vowel shapes. That's not something I'm going to control with the Y or Z axis, because I'm just going to be shifting through vowels with everything that I do, and the vowel is going to be linked to a certain pressure or a certain Y position, and that's not going to be great. So if I do this, I will use the modulation wheel, and I have the modulation wheel. My expression pedal is mapped to the mod wheel. So that is a different, an extra level of expression you can get if you want. It doesn't really work well for me. I don't like it. I'm going to keep, maybe I'll like it better after I practice with it more. But for me, I'm just going to leave this set up at the middle here and remove this modulation. And what I do find with the Formant is, depending on where the Formant parameter is set, I get a different range of about 1 to 2 octaves where the sound is really best, where the pitch and the Formant are lining up so that I hear the vowel clearly and it sounds like the singer is singing in their range. Like up here, I think I'm kind of starting to lose that ah sound. Whereas it's stronger down here. And very strong down here. So what happens when we move the Formant parameter? Basically, we're going to get a bigger or a smaller mouth. Move it up to 35. And if I move it down to say 15, I'm going to have a much larger person. And the voice will sound best in a lower octave. And it's going to sound pretty weird up here. Not necessarily bad. Just a little less human-ish. And so I'm loving this, because for my purposes, I want to have a bunch of different people of different shapes and sizes singing in a chorus. And I can do that. I can have like 8 different people just by moving the format knob around. You turn this up far enough, you can get kind of a child's voice. And you turn it down far enough, you're going to have a giant. Maybe that's even too low for a giant. Okay, maybe we can't get a good giant. So let me turn this format back up somewhere reasonable. So I'm very happy with where I'm at with this. Just by switching this format around and redrawing this this wavetable, because this is not a very precisely drawn wavetable. You saw me throw it down in like 20 seconds. I should talk about this a little more. So I looked up glottal waveform, and I got a bunch of images, and they were something like this. Some of them were more kind of wider here, but wider here it was maybe just the same waveform in a different polarity, because this one is wider here. Anyways, I looked at a bunch of pictures and I experimented with some of them, and these shapes gave me the best results. But there's like a wide range of similar shapes that you could use, and each one's going to give your singer a little bit of a different character. It'll be a little bit of a different person. So between that and changing the format to get bigger and smaller people, I can put together a pretty nice 8-part all-girl chorus, and who doesn't want that? But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I wanted a more masculine voice in here. We got quieter somehow. Now, you might naively think that, well, men are bigger than women, so I can just turn down my format and play in a lower register. But you might just sound like you have a very large woman. And I've found, and I don't have a scientific explanation for this. This is just something that I noticed while experimenting with these things. Kind of the key to a more masculine voice is to get some sidebands, particularly some subharmonics, into your waveform. So I'm going to do that with phase distortion again. It also works with FM. But I'm going to get phase distortion from oscillator B, activate oscillator B, switch this to the sine wave, and turn the level all the way down. And I want to do the equivalent of a phase modulation with a ratio of 0.5, which will give me some subharmonics. So to do that, I'm just going to turn the octave down by 1 and bring up this phase distortion a bit. That sounds a bit more manly to me. And I found it even turns up if I crank this Formant way up. Even in this high register here, it's sounding more masculine. It's sounding like a little boy rather than a woman. So that's the simple way to do it. We can also get more character and more characters and more personalities out of this phase distortion. Because we don't need to use an exact 0.5 ratio. We can play around with different things. What I'm doing here is if we play with non-integer ratios, so not 0.25, not 0.5, not 1, not 2, but other numbers, we're going to get a lot of inharmonics here. Which doesn't sound quite human. But if I turn this phase distortion knob up, I can hear it really well, so I can now tune it to a place where it will not sound horrible. And then if I turn the level back down to a reasonable amount, so I tuned this all the way up 98 cents, which brings us close to a +5 semitones. +5 and +7, or -5 and -7 as they are inverse, those are going to give you the closest to integer ratios. But we can also find sweet spots in other places. let's stop having a child. Let's get a low formant. And we can also, if we wanted to, we could modulate the amount here. And kind of say we wanted a little bit of a growl on the y-axis, which remember is macro 2 now. So modulate A warp 2. Kind of a gargly kind of guy. It's not the most realistic thing, but it can be another cool thing to do. This one's kind of reminding me of some Muppet or another, maybe multiple Muppets. Maybe this guy doesn't sing the whole song, he just comes in for a particular part where you need that sort of. So that's a good way of masculinizing the voice. I'm going to go back to being a female. And I'm just going to talk about a couple final notes, little extra ideas. First of all, the Portamento. In my previous videos on this subject, I think I kind of recommended just stay away from the Portamento, just keep it really low. And the reason I did that is too much Portamento makes you sound like a mini Moog. But I think with the Formant filter here, it's working better. Sounding less unnatural. And in real life, a human voice will have some portamento to it. Very, very few of us have agile enough vocal cords to instantly change pitch. So this is worth playing around with. Probably what I'm going to do most of the time on these sounds is I'm going to use the expression pedal to control the modulation amount. So the portamento amount, excuse me. So why don't I do that here? So if I want to be more human, I can have the Portamento higher. That's probably a little too high. And if I want to switch into something where I need faster and clearer notes and I'm okay with sounding more like an instrument, then I'll turn the Portamento down. So I'll do some more experimenting with that. I'll probably do different things for different voices and different purposes. And I'm going to leave you with one last special effect. I like a good breathy sound, which I had a really hard time achieving in the other synthesizers. One thing that helps with Serum is that its noise generator is a sample, and it's got a lot of good ones in here. What I would actually do is, I have my own samples that I would use for this. I have some recordings of people breathing. That's not weird. And some of them I really like, and I would use those. I do think the H breath is very good here. The pitch of the H breath, so let me just turn up the level so we can hear better. So in a narrow range, around 50%. Changing that pitch will give you kind of this Formant effect, more of a small versus a large breathing person. So for this voice, I'd want it kind of high. Now what we can do is, I've been trying to do this for a long time. It's not easy. Try to get the breath sound, because you mostly hear the breath when the person is not singing, right? You hear the breath between the notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this level up a bit. Not very high, maybe 7%. Well, I'll turn it up higher than that so we can be clear that we're hearing it. This is an effect that's going to be best if it's subtle. So we're going to want to turn this level back down later. And I'm going to give some release to my envelope over here. Be a couple seconds release. Now because I'm controlling my level with the pressure, the singing note is going to stop the instant I lift my finger, but this tail will catch the breath. If I go back to my matrix and grab macro 1 and just use that to turn down the volume of the noise. And then I'm going to add some rise and fall to it. And we should hear a little bit of a breathing effect. Now I would turn that down some on the release. Back to the oscillator, I would turn the level back down because I want this to be a subtle effect. And if you want, you can add some variation to the level. So I'm going to turn it back down and use my release velocity. I love it anytime I find a chance to use release velocity. Of course, I can never remember where it is. It's under note here, I think. Yeah, release velocity. The unsung and unused hero of multiple sounds, I'm sure. So that's going to modulate the noise level. So if you've got a big note, you got to take a big breath after. Give it a longer rise and fall. Now this is going to work best when you're in a mix. It is, if you're doing this on a solo sound with no accompaniment, it's going to sound like you're trying too hard. And it's going to seem fake. But if you use this in a mix with other things, it can add like just a nice little dimension that if you keep it subtle enough, it's not going to bother anybody, and it will add a little bit of life to the sound. Turn my format back down to the 20s. And now I'm going to turn off the mono and legato. So for the last thing, I just want to show a cool layered approach to this, get a couple voices going on. This is one of my favorite tricks to do on the Linstrument that you can't do on a lot of other things, because the Linstrument has rows, so I can do multiples of the same note. Now that noise is bothering me, so I'm going to turn this level down some more. I am so looking forward to using this in a song or several songs. Having that drone going on in the same register as the melody. They use that effect in a lot of medieval or medieval-inspired music and some Scandinavian music that I really like. I just think it's the coolest thing in the world. They do that with fiddles too. Anyway, so that was my video on making human-inspired voices in Serum. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again someday.